Welcome back to Society Case Files. My name is Robert, and today I want to talk about a couple of games that I've been playing. If you like this kind of content and you want to see more, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Otherwise, I'm going to dive right in. The first game I'm going to talk about is Worshippers of Cthulhu. I have another video about this, but it came out when the game was still in early access. The game is now 1.0, and quite honestly, it's freaking awesome. They did do a bit of refinement since I played it, but it doesn't look significantly different to go totally crazy with it. I've noticed that they've sort of streamlined the way that the cultists work, but there is still quite a bit of micromanagement to do in the game. You really do have to pay attention to a lot of different irons in the fire, and that becomes particularly true once you have more than one settlement. Then you're kind of bouncing back and forth, and you'll be taking advantage of the speed that the game plays quite a bit, either pausing it or making it go faster. Once you really start to get into the flow, though, it's fairly reasonably easy. And I know that was kind of a ridiculous statement to make, but it does manage to allow you a sense that you're doing a good job, even if you feel a little overwhelmed. Primarily, I think that once you start to feel like, oh my gosh, there's too much going on, it would be important to pause the game, take stock of everything going on, and make sure you're doing the right thing. As I was playing, I did run into some situations where I didn't see a piece of feedback, and it wasn't obvious to me that, for instance, my storage had run out of space, so I had to build more. But I have no idea how long I was out of space because I was busy working on rituals and stuff. So it's important to keep track of all of those pieces of information that they throw at you, even if they're hard to notice. And some other things that are a little bit of a pain. One, you can't queue up the destruction of property. In other words, there's these ruins and stuff that you could take out. Now, this is hardly a big complaint, and I did mention it in my previous video that you can't queue them up. But there isn't that many of them, so it kind of doesn't matter. It's just a little bit annoying, especially since you can queue up other things like building buildings and that sort of thing. The carving, which is absolutely disgusting, where you basically carve symbols into the flesh of your followers, I find it to be a little bit confusing as well. Some of the symbols are darn close to one another, and when I tried to do a specific one, I kept getting the wrong one, and I'm not entirely sure why. Other than maybe I just made it too big. But, I mean, you're using a knife and you're cutting up people. It's not exactly the biggest palette in the world. I don't know. Whatever. They've got it going on, and maybe eventually I'll get better at it. But for now, I ended up with a lot of people who I was trying to get into the blood draining profession become, and I'm not kidding, ale makers, basically. I don't know why those are so close together. Complete madness, which I guess is fitting. A lot of the game is pretty straightforward, though. It's not like it's a big combat game. You're not making tons of troops and sending them out to kick anyone's butt. You're pretty much just creating this cult, generating fanaticism and faith, building more impressive buildings, and diving in. If you click on the materials button, you'll see that they have added just an absolute ton of resources that you could gather and keep track of. It's a little daunting, and I imagine that as you get into even more settlements, it will be even more absurd. To be honest, I do see that this game could get to the point where it might be a little overwhelming. Like I said earlier, with 2 settlements, you're starting to get a little bit of a feel of that. But as it gets more intense, I think that it could be something that you'll be pausing a lot, especially as you basically have waves of followers coming in, and they got to have homes. So if you don't have enough homes, you got to build them. Now, you could be, sacrifice them to build horrors and stuff. So there is the diminishing returns on those guys. However, as they come in, they're just sitting there literally incapable of doing anything until you give them a place to live. Then you give them a place to live, you assign them to something, but you've got to keep track of all this stuff. And then you've got to keep track of each of the buildings and see, are they even working anymore? Are they working to the most efficient manner they can? Are the homes attached close enough to the resources that are going to give them their needs? For example, they need to be close to an elder temple. If your settlement builds too much and the guys have to commute too far to the temple, they no longer gain the benefit from it, so you have to build another one. And that's just a very brief description of the kinds of things that you can expect in the game. And again, as it gets more intense, it's going to require you to pay more attention to all of those things. All around, though, I have to say that I absolutely love the game, and I would recommend it to anyone. Now that it's 1.0, if you were on the fence before because of early access, don't be. It's totally worth it. I easily put in 2 hours this morning without even a second thought. It just happened, and I had a great time. So definitely one of the top games that I played. Last time I played it, it looked like it was back in October when the early access first released, and that was very fitting. Playing it in May, I mean, it's kind of fun being halfway to Halloween, but this is definitely a game that benefits from the spooky season. There's just so much atmosphere here that it really does generate something. And considering outside it's all spring and, you know, allergy ridden as of this video, it's it just doesn't have the same impact. And yet, had a great time. All right, moving on. Let's talk about the game, The Precinct. Now, I like The Precinct. I'll just get that out of the way. I thought it was kind of fun. There are some absurd things about it that just make me laugh. For the most part, their objective of making a basically GTA original sort of game, it worked out, I think. You know, you play as the cops, you go around and you stop crimes. And for the most part, there doesn't really seem to be any penalty for doing it wrong. I didn't play it a whole lot because it does get a little bit tedious. However, what I did play of it, I think that for the price tag, for sure, it's definitely worth checking out. Some of the things that I thought were a little absurd, I'll just detail them. Right off the bat, when you first start playing the game, you meet all these characters and they're just ridiculous. Their dialogue is kind of awful in a lot of ways, very cliche. And you get your task to go out and basically hang out with this grizzled vet who's basically looking on retirement, you know, pretty much that 1980s trope. First thing he wants to do, go get a hot dog. You go and you get some lunch, and then you get a call for some bank robbery. You show up, this is your first day, you gun down a bunch of bank robbers, and then enter into a high-speed chase that basically results in utter mayhem across the streets. I mean, the people who live in this town are like basically surviving an Avengers war every day. You're like crashing through fences, trashing other people's cars, making pedestrians leap out of the way. You finally stop them. My car was completely trashed. I'm missing the hood. It's all messed up. There's dead robbers. There's probably dead civilians. There's millions of dollars of damage. And I'm like, wow, I'm going to get a really low rating on this pursuit. No, I got a great rating. In fact, we go back to the precinct and they're like, that was fantastic work. Let's go talk to the evidence guy. Wait, what? Okay, whatever. And then because I did such a great job on that, they gave me the ability to fly a helicopter, which is even more absurd. It's like, you know what? You didn't cause enough damage with the car. What can you do with a helicopter? Fortunately, I didn't crash that into anything, surprisingly, but it was still kind of fun. Other things about the game that are crazy is that they do try to incorporate a small amount of realism into it, at least as far as your activities are concerned, even though you're basically trashing cars and running into stuff all the time. It doesn't really matter because it doesn't care about that. But it does care about some procedure stuff. Like, for example, you can give people tickets and you got to do it the right way and that sort of thing. I'm not entirely sure what happens if you do it wrong, but it is funny that you can do quite a few things that, like, read people their rights or not. I couldn't hit the button fast enough a few times and I went back and turned in the quest and put the person in jail, and it's like, okay. You know, there was no like, hey, you need to remember, read them their rights, it's going to get kicked or anything. They didn't care about that. I guess it's just semantic in this world. Some of the videos I've seen have suggested that the game does get a little tedious after a while because you pretty much are doing the same things over and over again. Either you're on foot doing a patrol or you're driving around with your car looking for crazy drivers or drunk drivers or people speeding, that kind of thing. And I mean, all of this was kind of fun. I got to admit, when I was doing it, I enjoyed it. Some of the shootouts are utterly ridiculous. I mean, you're just taking out tons of guys, and there's no, hey, you're off work, and you know, we'll see you in 3 days or a week. It's just like, great work, get back out there and do it again. And that really feeds into its sort of 80s aesthetic. And if you didn't know that it was 80s, well, first off, the car looks like all those old patrol cars from back in the day. And then there's the music. The music really does sell it 100%, and you should really know what you're getting into at that point. All around, for the price tag, again, I would completely recommend the Precinct. In fact, both it and Worshippers of Cthulhu are roughly around the same price, and they're both really great. I personally prefer Cthulhu, but that's just because I guess I'm a little bit more into that civilization building right now than I am into the sort of semi-action adventure that this Precinct is. That said, depending on which of the two types of games you like, it might be a clear winner. And again, for the price, it's just, you got to try one of these, especially if you do it on Steam and you hate it, you've got the refund policy, which is great. So anyway, that's all I really wanted to say about them. I hadn't played them enough to give you like a full-on review, but you know, if you were on the fence at all and you just wanted a quick explanation as to whether or not these games were worth trying for even the low price, or maybe you thought maybe because they were low price they wouldn't be worth it, I'm here to tell you they both are. So please do give them a shot, at least watch the videos, and I think you'd have a good time. This is Robert with Society Case Files, signing off.